Friends, welcome to this lesson on the history of English language. As you know, today English is the most dominant world language. With the evolution and emergence of information technology, the power and dominance of English is going to further increase more and more. At present, English is spoken as the official language and used for many purposes in many countries across the globe, starting from the Britain, US, Canada, New Zealand, the South Asian subcontinent, Australia. In addition, English language is understood and used for many purposes by people from all over the world, from the Russians to the South Americans, from Japanese to the Koreans, and to various other parts of the world. This mighty English language, as a matter of fact, has very humble beginnings. As we know, the British Islands, the so-called geographical entity of Great Britain, is inhabited by people called Celts, Picts, and Scots. These people themselves were settlers from Europe. They settled down in the British Isles sometime around 5th century BC perhaps, and later on the Romans, in their expansion of Roman Empire, invaded Britain and subjugated these people for over 4 centuries. Sometime after the 4th century, the British legions, the Roman legions, left Britain, and the Celts by then had an established way of life. First, the life was very well organized, and Christianity was introduced to them. The civic and agricultural life has an orderly way of functioning. It is these people who are using a language called Celtic as their mother tongue and as their official language for purposes of school, church, and state in whatever form it existed. The Celtic language was in fact a dialect of the Vulgar Latin. Vulgar Latin was the official language of the then Roman Empire, and it is one form of Vulgar Latin that is prevalent in Britain in those days in the form of Celtic. Celtic was written in the Celtic symbolic language. As you can see from chart 1, the Celtic forms and the Roman forms, you can compare that they are similar as well as dissimilar, because both of them came from the same origin called the Roman script. Like in India, many of the scripts of Indian languages had a single origin called Brahmi. That is why they look alike and also different. Telugu, Kannada, Tamil, Nagari, Bengali, Odia, all these scripts are alike because they originated from Brahmi. Anyway, that is apart from the English language. The Celtic language, as it was used by these peoples, the Celts often were invaded by the Picts and the Scots from the north. To withstand their invasions, the Celts invited the Roman Empire to intervene and save them, but the Romans did not reply. So instead, they urged the Germanic races, the Frisians, the Jutes, the Anglo-Saxons, and the Frisians. These people were living in the modern countries like Germany, Holland, Norway, and Belgium. The Germanic races, the Germanic tribes at that time, honored their request and came in droves invading Britain. In course of time, instead of being the saviors of the Celts, they subjugated them. They subjugated them so well that slowly and slowly, through interaction and intermarriage, the invading tribes of Jutes, Frisians, Angles and Saxons and various other Germanic tribes got settled in the present day Britain, and their language, or one of their languages, which is called Angles at the time, probably they were the most dominant of the invading tribes, became the official language of the conglomeration of tribes, invading tribes of Britain, and slowly it replaced the Celtic language. The origin of English started here. The Germanic tribes contributed to the birth and growth of English language as we know today at this point of time. This language is called the Old English. Old English, as we know, is the West Germanic dialect of the Germanic branch of the Indo-European family of languages, to which most of the European languages and Indo-Iranian languages and Indo-Aryan languages belong. For example, our Hindi, Bengali, Persian, all the Russian, all these languages belong to the Indo-European family, of which Germanic is one group, from which the West Germanic branch produced what is now called the language of the Britain, English language. English has become the language of the court, the state, the church, and the school. All these things have been recorded in various forms of literature. The Old English period lasted from 5th century AD to around 11th century. During this period, the English language, as spoken and used by these people, was a synthetic language. A synthetic language is one where one word contains many grammatical elements in it. For example, see chart 2, where you can see the declension of the English noun for the singular as well as the plural. And also the personal pronoun has several different forms, unlike the modern one. So this language slowly got changed into Middle English by around the 11th century AD. The specimens of Old English language were preserved, as a matter of fact, very well preserved in many of the religious works of that time, particularly Beowulf, a classic 3000-line saga of King Beowulf, and Seafarer, Wanderer, and so many others. It is because of these books that we could still gain some knowledge of the form and the grammar and the structure of Old English language. As I told you earlier, Old English language was a synthetic language. It has evolved slowly into an analytic language. That means the Old English forms got slowly changed into the modern forms. At this point, I must tell you that English language had and still has what is called mobile stress. It is because of the loss of stress on the penultimate syllable, that is, the shift of stress from the last syllable to the penultimate syllable, that contributed to the loss of declensions in the noun. And similarly, various other changes have taken place. As you know, English language has two types of verbs, the weak verbs and the strong verbs. What we call as weak verbs are the ones where you have three forms of tense: love, loud, loud. The strong verbs are go, went, gone. That means the irregular verbs are called strong and the regular verbs are called weak. In the history of English language, the change of strong verbs into weak verbs is one process which contributed tremendously to the analytical change in the language itself. Why these changes have taken place? we cannot at this point discuss, but we simply notice that Old English synthetic form has become analytic by the time of Middle English. Now, the story of English begins actually here around the 11th century. In 1066 AD, William the Conqueror of Normandy of France invaded Britain and occupied all of the British Isles and established his kingdom. He killed King Harold in the battle and occupied London. Because of this French invasion, English language has undergone tremendous change both in vocabulary and in its grammatical structure. For example, hundreds and hundreds of words have come into English language at this period of time. The English language, though spoken by the common man, was not at all used during this occupation, Norman occupation from 1066 to around 12th century. That is more about 150 years, a little more than that. English language remained as an unused language for official purposes, like it happens in any other invaded country. Still, in India, all the Indian languages were used by common people, but the official languages have been, during the colonial period, either Persian during the Muslim invasions, Muslim occupations, or English when the British ruled the roost. Though Indian languages survived the onslaught, English language survived in spite of the French occupation of Britain for over 150 years. Though many languages have entered into the language, the English grammar, the structure of English remained unaffected. It was because of the strength and resilience of the language and its speakers that English language survived this kind of an invasion. When the English people overthrew the Normans and regained power, English language slowly became again the court language, the state language, the church language, and the school language. You may wonder why and how the British could retain their language in spite of colonial occupation by the French. There are several reasons. Number one, the French invaders constituted only about 2% of the total population. Number two, English language by then had a very established literature and very powerful and strong and very well known. And number three, growth of literacy or at least reading habits of the people. Because of these three reasons, the French language could not replace the English language like the English language replaced the Celtic language some 500 years earlier. Once the French left, English language has been left with many French words which belong particularly to the areas of governance and culture. Many of the words that we now use are of French origin. For example, commence as opposed to begin. The words like dinner and supper are of British origin, though breakfast is still English. There are many words which came from the judiciary, from French language, like law, fiefdom, feudal, taxes. All these words are French in origin. Many a time, the invading language kept its influence on the occupied language, but in this case, the English people and their language got strengthened by the infusion of French words and French usages. This contributed to two factors. One, expansion of lexicon. Number two, diversification of derivation. The English language gained many forms which contributed to the expansion and diversification of its words, with many French suffixes, infixes, and prefixes, which contributed again towards the evolution of modern English language. With the advent of the French, the English language has become what is called fixed word order language. For example, in Old English, see the chart, that particular sentence you can read in any order. The words can be at any place, but the meaning remains the same. The same in modern English. Say, for example, I was besmirched with blood. The word order cannot be changed. It is this fixed word order which has contributed to the free play of diversification of the language. History of English language can be divided into three periods: from 5th to 11th century, that is Old English; 11th to 15th century, Middle English; and 16th century onwards, it is Modern English. As I have indicated earlier, the language from Old English to Middle English has undergone significant changes, but the changes continued even during Middle English period. For example, the words like five, name, and down, see the chart, these words have what is called a vocalic change, has undergone vocalic change. The vowel, this is called the great vowel shift. This particular vowel shift has produced the modern English language from the Middle English forms. Why a particular change has taken place in a language is something which a linguist cannot answer, but the changes have taken place, and it is called the great vowel shift. Each vowel has upgraded itself into a higher level. That is, a low vowel has become high vowel, a high vowel becomes a higher vowel, the higher vowel has become a diphthong. This is the great vowel shift, which you can see from the chart. The words which were spoken as fief has become five, the word like naam has become name, the word doon has become down. So it is this change which produced the current pronunciation of modern English language. Another significant change around this period is the invention of the printing press by Gutenberg in Germany. And a tradesman called Caxton has brought it to Britain. Once the books have been printed in book form, then there has been a tremendous change in the language. First of all, its influence on the language is far more significant than anything else. The printing was very slow in the process at the beginning, but over a period of time, a large number of presses have come, and as a result of it, a large number of books also have been published. Because of this Gutenberg revolution, or the discovery of printing press, several changes have taken place in all the modern European languages, particularly English. Number one, the spelling and pronunciation has become more or less fixed. No significant changes, phonetic or grammatical, have taken place after the discovery of the printing press in the language. Number three, reading public has increased and literacy has spread, which again has contributed to the consolidation of the language and its development into its modern form. And three, many writers and linguists have started publishing books on like dictionaries, encyclopedias and grammars for the benefit of those who are unlettered and illiterate, and particularly for the school children. The discovery of printing press and the publication business as such in England has its influence on English language, not only in its preservation in England but also in its spread elsewhere. It is a little after this period that Britain was looking towards colonial occupations in Africa and in India and Americas. It was this printing press which helped these people to spread their language so rapidly into other continents. First, Britain occupied Asian countries like India and North America, Australia, and many nations in the African continent. And they took their language and their book. It was because of this that in the world today we have different kinds of Englishes spoken. The Australian English. Some of you must have observed in cricket commentaries that the Australian commentator would say game for game and day for day and things like that. And as we Indians speak English differently from the native speakers, so do the Africans when they speak English. In spite of the various forms of English as spoken by these peoples across the continents from Australia to America, in the written form there is no distinction. Once a person writes in English either in Australia or in India or in Britain or in the US, there will not be any problem in recognizing it as an English sentence. But pronunciation of course is different. That is why we label them now as Englishes of the world or the various dialects of English language. Just like Telugu has three different dialects like Rayalaseema, Telangana and Coastal in the spoken form, but in the written form each person understands what is written, though they may speak it differently. Similarly, English language is written alike in most of the countries, but spoken differently in India, in Australia and in America and in Great Britain, which is supposed to be the birthplace of English language. That is why modern people are considering that one day English may extinguish the existence of all other languages, but that may not be possible in spite of the fact that English is the most commonly used language in information technology, because people don't want to give up their mother tongue or their tool of communication for anything that may attract people otherwise. So, the threat of English is visible, but it need not be a source of fear for any one of us that it may replace the other languages like Indian languages or European languages or anything like that. Because of its widespread use all over the world, naturally English language gained many words from other languages. Earlier we have spoken about the French contribution to English. Now let us see how many Indian words have entered into the English language. There are plenty, for your surprise, even one from Telugu also. The word bandicoot is from Telugu pandikokku, for your information. Similarly, there are many words from Hindustani like deko, catamaran from Tamil, mulgatani from Tamil, go down from Malayalam, and words like that. You would be surprised that English contains almost 80% foreign words and only about 20% of its original stock of Anglo-Saxon words. The language has the capacity to absorb and become richer by borrowing words from other languages. We have seen that English language has started as a non-literary language spoken by invading tribes, got established as the language of the state and the court and the church, and also was occupied for a long period by the French, but still it survived and it spread across the globe, all over the world. And today English language might look very, very big and gigantic, but as we have seen, its origin was very simple, very modest and very humble.